Hello and welcome to the Low Carb Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Holly Jean, and I am joined today with Dr. Dawn Clum. Hi, Dawn. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so glad to have you on today. Um, Let me introduce you to our audience. So, Dr. Don Clum, he is a chiropractor and he is a specialist in advanced metabolic nutrition. He has a really sought after program that is based on insulin resistance and metabolic health, and that is called insulin friendly living. And he coaches clients as well as trains practitioners on his methods for improving metabolic health. So, welcome to the show, Dr. Don.
All right. Thank you. It's great to be here. I've been looking forward to this. I love I love the topic, obviously, and I love how you do your show and frame it. So I'm looking forward. Let's go.
Yeah, I found you, my chiropractor, Dr. Rice in Costa Mesa. He was sharing a lot of um your posts, and so that's how I came to find you. And I love everything you share. Like it's easy to follow. You have like that perfect blend of sharing like the geeky nerdy side of the science, but also putting it in a way where it makes sense to like the everyday people. So I love that. Today, we are going to talk about fasting. We're going to talk about the fasting connection to diabetes, insulin management, ketosis, a lot of other things. But first, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about you and your story and how you came to practicing nutrition in your chiropractic practice?
Yeah, that's great. I'll be happy to. So, right when we graduated school, before chiropractic, I did get a degree in nutrition. So I had that going, but I wasn't going to go that route. I got it because I wanted to have no problem getting licensed anywhere I wanted to go. Ended up leaving school and going right to Costa Rica. We went to Costa Rica and we were there for 8 years. And we served the people of Costa Rica. I worked with the medical school down there and Life University. And we were the chiropractors for the Olympic committee and had a great time with that. Really good experience. Really got to learn Spanish. That was a plus. Really helps in a Spanish speaking country. And then went to Spain for a couple of years. And then we came back to the States. And when we came back to the States is when I really got into more of the metabolic nutrition, because when I came back, we had small children. And I was just shocked at the culture shift that had happened, or at least that I perceived happened in 10 years. The health issues, the allergies, the weight issues with kids were just very apparent and off the charts in my mind. And so I really got into it to kind of prevent my kids and my family from going down that same road by default, because that's what's going on around us. And so I started, we had a full wellness practice and we had chiropractic. My wife handled the chiropractic side. I started doing nutrition again and got into seminars and learning and cracked the books. And then we had a gym in there. We had a wellness psychologist, a sports masseuse, and just really had a very integrative practice. One time I was working with an MD to help them get off their prescription, their patients get off their prescription opiates. And that was a big project that we did and it had a big impact. It was a great experience. And then at a certain point, I had a friend of mine who started a population health company, and he came out to visit, and it was great to see him, best friend from college. And when he saw the practice, he loved the results. He loved the whole thing. And he said, "Hey, can you translate this into a big population health type of model?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, you want to try?" And long story short, I ended up selling the office, moving to Washington to go join them. And for 3 years, I wrote and designed and delivered all sorts of population health-based programs, everything from sleep to metabolic syndrome. Our biggest one was the diabetes prevention program, where we actually challenged the current one that's out there that's promoted by the government. And it was very different than their model. And in doing that is what really got me to dig into the cellular function of what's going on in our metabolism and basically our health, because I had to be really prepared, because I was going to present this to big companies, 10,000, 100,000 employees. They had their own medical staff and wellness groups that we had to get through the door with. And so I had to have everything buttoned down. And so I studied and researched everything I could. And that's when I really dug into the mechanics of it. And it opened my eyes to a lot of things. Because when you understand the mechanics of how these things work, it changes the lens that you're looking through and the way you behave. Or I think it could, if you're willing to. And that's what became the base of the insulin resistance focus that I created for my emphasis in care. And then when I finished that, they continued with the programs, doing great. They have thousands of people going through these programs, and with great success. I decided to go virtual, and that's what I'm doing now, where I have a virtual practice. I work with people distance, on the phone, online, just like we're doing right now. And I have my programs up there, and I help people design them and coach them through it. And my signature programs, that is a 6-month program for advanced metabolic health recovery, is what I call it.
Oh, fantastic. And you know what? Like, that is such an amazing perception that you had when you came back from the state, or back from being in Costa Rica and Spain, and coming back to the United States, and noticing that trajectory of more disease, more sickness, more illness. Do you think that it really took you stepping out to see it, or do you think it was, you would have noticed it had you still been here?
I don't know. I'd like to think I would have noticed it. We be going out of the States, we had to really button up our own systems, our own healthcare of our family, because they do things differently, and especially in socialized medicine. And so we existed completely outside of that. And so we really got to know what we wanted and what we did. When we came back, it was just the contrast was so significant. I would go to kids' activity meetings at school, like PTA and things like that, and I'd see all these kids. And I first got introduced to the peanut table, and I didn't know what that was, and how they separated kids based on allergies, and they had a medication station, and I was really kind of surprised. And then but then I realized why the kids were struggling. I met the parents in the PTA, and they were struggling. And just it was quite an eye-opening experience. And I decided, if we don't start acting like if we're not proactively improving our health, we will passively lose it. Because it was obvious to me that became the default here in the States. And now, many years removed, and being here and having traveled and done this internationally, unfortunately, it's true that if people are not actively working towards not going down that road, that's the road they go down, to ill health, to weight issues, which is a hormonal issue at the center. And so it all ties back together. And it was eye-opening, to say the least.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, because even if you're following the guidelines, you're following what's recommended by the government, you think you're doing everything right. But however, we're not reversing this trend of diabetes or obesity. And so it's important what you're doing. I'm glad you're doing it. This information needs to get out. And I know that's not an easy road to travel, as you're going against the grain and going complete opposite of what people have grown up learning is healthy, and to challenge what is recommended to us from our government regulatory agencies. So,
well, that became very obvious when I was doing the diabetes prevention program, because there is a current program that's been around for decades, and it's the basis of the multiple meals, multiple snacks a day, cutting calories 500, getting your steps and your physical activity, and so on. And their goal was to prevent diabetes. But now we have all that information. I analyzed it. This is a full-time job going through it, and it didn't prevent diabetes. It did cause some weight loss for a short bit of time, but it did not change their blood sugar levels, their cholesterol levels, their waist circumference, anything metabolically important, just some pounds on the scale. And so when I created mine, I went a different route, and that's when I really realized we have definitions wrong here in the States, even in the medical system, outdated by a lot. And that reason why their stuff doesn't work, or if at best it makes a tiny shift.
Yeah, and it takes, even if all the science that we have now is showing that it's wrong, nothing in the government happens quickly. So it's going to take 20 years to catch up with the information we have now, and by that time, who knows what is going to be the latest. Yeah, right.
Right. My dad is in healthcare education, and he broke it down for me. It takes 23 years from a new discovery to be found, if it's accepted, to then get through all the processes to eventually get into the schools, to get into the standard of care. And 20 years is too long. By then, permanent damage can be done, and I'm not going to wait.
Yeah, it's not fast enough. And then we don't even need to go into all the lobbyists that would fight anything changing anyways. So all right. So on this show, we like to talk about, we like to look at headlines that are circulating in like common news sources, popular magazines or websites, more mainstream type of news articles. And we like to discuss them through the lens of functional nutrition and health. And as we know, the health and diet information that is presented to us is not always the full story. It's not always fully accurate. So this show is our opportunity to speak with guests such as yourself, to review articles that are like within the guest's wheelhouse, your area of expertise. And so there's a lot of things I want to talk to. So I just kind of want to dive into this first article here. And it's titled Study Intermittent Fasting is Not All That Effective for Weight Loss. And this article is from fatherly.com, which is a leading digital media brand for dads. And it starts off by saying that fasting longer between meals sounds like a logical way to lose weight. But new research is saying that you're likely losing muscle and not fat, and that the good old fashioned calorie restriction is still your best bet for getting in shape. A quote from the article says, many people believe that diets based on fasting are especially effective for weight loss, or that these diets have particular metabolic health benefits, even if you don't lose weight. This is said by the director of the Center of Nutrition, Exercise, and Metabolism at the University of Bath. And this is also the person who led the research. He says, but intermittent fasting is no magic bullet, and the findings of our experiment suggest that there is nothing special about fasting when compared with more traditional standard diets people might follow. Dr. Clum, what were your thoughts about this article?
Well, it's there's some of the elements are true, and some, but a lot of it's misleading. It depends on what you're looking at. Intermittent fasting, first of all, is a newer term. I've been doing fasting for a long time. Skipping breakfast, extending your overnight fast is not even in my book of fasting, right? That was, we used to call eating windows and meal timing.
Right.
So now they call it fasting. Well, okay. Well, if you think about it like this, the average American, about 90% of them out there that in these very large studies, they eat in a 12-hour window, which means they eat from maybe 8 in the morning to 8 at night, whatever it is, 12 hours. And then 50% of them eat in a 15-hour window. If you can imagine that, that means they're eating when they get up and they go to bed, and all the time in between with the snacking and everything that's going on. It's an incredible number. Only 10% of Americans eat in a 10-hour or less window, never mind 8 like they talk about in intermittent fasting. A lot of intermittent fasting is done incorrectly. It's not just an excuse to not eat breakfast. Okay, it's not justification to not eat breakfast, because the large data pools say that that's not a good idea, right? And so if you set it up right, it's a completely different than you'll see in those studies, all right? Because a lot of them are they call it intermittent fasting, but it's not regimented and is not set up in the best way. And even in these studies, it does show metabolic shift. If you're just comparing weight loss, do you know how much weight it takes to become diabetic? I'm
I
asking
do
you.
not.
Or how much weight does a type 2 diabetic have to lose to become non-diabetic? Most people don't know. Don't worry. I teach this at medical conferences and they don't know either, right? The reality is it's only 1 gram. It's only 1 gram, but that 1 gram has to come out of your pancreas. You remove that gram that's mucking up the works out of the pancreas in the type 2 diabetic, and they become no longer diabetic, independent of how much weight they lose, right? So it's a big different story. I rather see people's dimensions change than their weight change. Okay, I like to have both. Who wouldn't? But that's a more positive indicator of metabolic health, life, longevity, quality of life than the number on the scale. Now, you do it right in time, that'll change first, the dimensions. People say, oh, I'm not losing weight yet, but my pants fit differently, right? Or I feel my shirts and my clothes are just looking differently. That's a good sign. Eventually, the weight will catch up, because what the body has to work on when we're fasting traditionally, as well as intermittent fasting, is the fat in the body that's the most dangerous. It prioritizes. It's going to go for the triglycerides, or the fat that's in your muscle that shouldn't be there, that's in your liver, like fatty liver. Non-alcoholic fatty liver is the #1 liver condition in the world right now. non-alcoholic, that's diet induced, it's from what we're eating, and then out of the pancreas and out of the viscera. We know about visceral fat that comes out first, and that your body won't start burning fat off of your body, like as in body fat, like we don't like to see, until that's gone. And so if you're doing the right things but not seeing the scale move, just know that your body's working on that first. It has to come out first. Your body's going to save your butt before it reduces your butt, if you know what I mean. And because that's life threatening. And so we see shifts in that before we see shifts in the weight. And so that's a much better marker. When we did the comparison between our program and the national program, the National Diabetes Prevention Program, I set up the research, I set up the design, we monitored the whole thing. We lost weight at about the same rate. So they're kind of true. It's not much different than theirs, but we saw a decrease in waist circumference, higher HDL, which is a sign of a low HDL is a sign of metabolic syndrome. We saw a decrease in blood pressure. We saw a decrease in blood sugar. We saw a decrease in the bad cholesterol number. We saw all of the metabolic markers shift, where all they could do is get that weight to shift. Just like what we're talking about in this article. If you're just looking at weight, you're looking the wrong way. You're looking the wrong way. Anything, you change your diet in any which way, you can lose some weight. You've heard of the Twinkie diet, right? Or the cookie diet. That's where it comes from. You make a change, you feel a change, but we want more than that. We want to change how the body's functioning. We want to change the basic fundamental metabolic health of that individual, because that's what's going to make the health impact.
That's a really good description, especially for people who are struggling with the numbers on the scale not moving, because it can be really discouraging, especially when you feel like you are being consistent with changing the way you're eating, with exercising, moving your body, prioritizing sleep, all those things that are going to help your body lose weight, but not seeing that scale move. It's frustrating. It's discouraging. So to understand that your body needs to become healthy on the inside first and prioritize that internal fat before the aesthetic fat. I think that could be really helpful for people. So thank you for explaining it that way.
That's a big deal. And it has to happen that way. You don't lose weight to get healthy. It doesn't work that way. You get healthy and you lose weight.
Yeah.
Even in the bigger, more aggressive programs that I run with people one-on-one, the fat that comes out first is what's threatening them, right? And so that has to, we've seen it. We've watched it on the imaging. Livers that are twice as big as normal, huge medical emergency type levels, go back to normal. That has to happen first, because the liver is what processes the burning of the fat. That's what goes on. And so you have to have a good program, know it's a good program, and stick to it. And then just keep, because what'll happen as soon as that suddenly gets back to normal, boom, weight loss will come off. And even in long fasting, the body's smart. People who have weight to lose a lot of weight. People who don't. I have athletes, competitive athletes, and lean people go through the program too for health, and they use it to get stronger in their routines. They don't lose a dramatic amount of weight because they didn't have it to lose. The body is really smart. It's not as linear as we think.
Right. And that's where we get that term skinny fat. It's just because you're lean doesn't mean you're necessarily healthy on the inside. You could be metabolically dysfunctional on the inside, but still look lean on the outside.
There are more people with metabolic syndrome at normal weight than there are morbidly obese.
Really?
By numbers, yeah, there are more. I used to, when I had my multidisciplinary office, we were right near the Hamptons, and we worked with a lot of people that they had time and money to invest in themselves, and they did. And they would come in and either look great, but we'd test them and they'd be as bad as anyone else. You couldn't tell by looking. We called it the skinny fat syndrome. And we saw it a lot in things, in people like, the tennis players or the yoga people. Again, good look, but man, they had just as much metabolic dysfunction as someone who's 100 pounds overweight.
Interesting. I want to back up to something you said about intermittent fasting and skipping breakfast. Did you say that that's doing it backwards and that you're not, like, can you, like, what was that?
I wrote a series called the dark side of intermittent fasting. Okay. We've made it too comfortable. We've gotten sloppy with it. Large data sets around the world, internationally, not just we're talking hundreds of thousands of people in these numbers, show that the longer you delay eating from waking up, the worse your metabolic outcomes are. Okay, so that says people who skip breakfast have more problems with weight, have more problems with diabetes, insulin resistance, and all these different metabolic issues. So there's that. Now, that doesn't apply to you or me because it's a population. We have to understand that. But that is a strong enough correlate for me to think about that. And so that's one strike against you as you do intermittent fasting. If you eat dinner too late in the evening, the same thing happens. Your metabolic numbers go down. Okay. If your largest meal of the day is dinner, it's going down again. Okay. If you're choosing junk food just because you're in your 8-hour window, it's another strike against you. It's compounding against you. You're really setting yourself up for problems. And so, but that's the traditional model. If as long as you eat in your 8-hour window and you extend it out, you're good. It's not true. Now, if you reverse those issues and start eating earlier, not every day, I do it on a rotational basis. 4 days a week, I'll eat breakfast, and then 3 days I won't, and I'll shift my window back. But I won't eat past 6 unless on a rare occasion I'm going out or something like that. And I don't have my biggest meal as dinner. All of those things compound your benefit, just like the opposite would compound the negative side. And so I call them magnifiers in my program. You want to stack the magnifiers everywhere you can so that you get more out of it, including what you get from fasting. You can actually enhance what is known to happen, which is a lot of great stuff. So, there's a lot of great information out there, and just skipping breakfast and eating an 8-hour window alone isn't doing it. And I saw it in practice because I used to teach that. I used to have the tagline, breakfast is the worst meal of the day. I was in there until I started seeing the data. And so I watched people, they would plateau like anybody else on a diet, and then they'd go backwards. And we're like, wait a minute, maybe this isn't the right idea. And that's when I started to apply these different things, created the rotation that I talk about, and you can eliminate a lot of that with that.
Okay, I want to hang out here a little bit longer. I do want to get to the other benefits of fasting, but I know a lot of our listeners are from the keto world, the low carb world, and they are doing the bulletproof coffee. They are not doing breakfast. They are prolonging their first meal and just doing the coffee. But something that Leah and I practice in our practice is like more of an intuitive type of eating. So if you wake up and you're hungry, you eat. So what is it there? Like, is it better to listen to your body cues and eat when you're hungry, or to wake up and just eat right away? Ancestrally, did our ancestors wake up and eat breakfast right away? Because I know there's some theories that they did not just wake up and have bacon and eggs. They had to go out and forage for a while. So talk to me more about this.
That's a lot of points in that question. I'll try to get to them.
Okay.
So one thing is, anything you do every day consistently, your body will adapt to and go backwards. A body does not like consistency. It doesn't. We do that for our benefit, for timing and making sure we get things in. That's not what's best for the body. The body is used to things changing all the time. You got to imagine, evolutionarily, we were outside. We didn't have fire for most of our genetic development. So when the sun went down, it was dark. We weren't doing anything, right? So everything was changing all the time: winter, summer, fall, spring, the whole 9 yards. And the food we ate was not fuel. Food is not fuel. It's information. It's telling you where you are in the world. It's telling you what time of year, or at least that's what it used to do, right? And your body responds to it. So timing is a big deal. If you look at our metabolic profile, everything from gastric acid, the stomach acid, and the way our intestines work and behave, to our hormones, to everything else. If I were to look at that on paper, I basically would say, oh, we're designed to eat in the morning because the body's getting ready to eat. You got to imagine, when they did their foraging and they got the things and they might have some food, but that light goes out. They're not eating and they got nothing else to do. So in the morning, I would imagine they would get up and they would get leftovers. That's also why fermented foods, I think, and foods that have some bacteria to them do so well with us. We actually thrive on that, and they balance our system, and they don't poison us like people think. So I think all of that ties in that evolutionarily we ate probably once, maybe towards the middle of the day, morning, and then maybe a little bit before night, but that's it. And then when the sun went down, we weren't sitting around eating at all. And so I think that's what our body's set up for. You got to think, thousands of generations doing that. That's how our genetics are hardwired at this point. You can see it metabolically with the hormones and the profile and so forth. So, and we also know that the later you eat, the more hunger you're going to have the next day. The later you eat, the worse glucose in your insulin is going to be the next day. We also used to think that our circadian rhythm of our body influenced or basically programmed our eating and our energy and everything else. Now we know it's the opposite. You program your circadian rhythm by your lifestyle, mainly with meal timing, and your physical activity. You can shift it back and forth. And the later you eat, the more you shift that back. That changes your sleep patterns. It changes how well you sleep, and it changes when your cortisol and insulin release, and it creates a whole different profile for you. You can change that dramatically. That's why shift workers and people who don't sleep well have so many metabolic problems. They can't lose weight, they gain weight, the depression goes through the roof, they have more visceral fat, you name it, they have everything. It's just we are flipping ourselves upside down.
Fascinating. I love this. Okay, I'm going to move on instead of keep talking about that. All right. So not everyone who tries intermittent fasting is doing so for weight loss. There are other benefits to fasting, and not just intermittent fasting, but benefits to fasting. And one of those specifically is autophagy. So why don't we move on to that topic?
Just to address your original question, you said,
yes.
Should we listen to our body or should we go by what we want? Most people can't listen to their body. Honestly, right now, because that's all hormonal. Hunger is hormonal, satiation is hormonal. And if you listen to your body might be speaking Chinese and you're speaking English, and we misinterpret that all the time, right? So until you're hormonally sensitive and been working on it, I tell people you got to program it out, because you can't listen to it because you'll be fooled.
Yeah, I agree with that. And definitely it's switching from being a sugar burner to a fat burner and being more metabolically stable. You do become more in tune with your body. But if you're still just eating like the standard American diet, you're being influenced by chemicals and sugars and all sorts of things. I agree with that. You cannot trust a body that is running off of cravings and mood.
Back to the evolution of our genome, just think, if we got cranky and we got unmotivated or brain fog or low energy or couldn't work every time we skipped a meal, never mind a day, we would have been extinct a long time ago. Hormonally, the opposite happens. Everything starts to heighten and everything starts to get more sensitive, and your focus gets narrow because your body's going, okay, we haven't had food for a while, time to eat, and get you ready for it. So, that's another little indicator as well.
Fascinating. I love it. I love this topic. Okay,
this
next article here is really it's just an informational piece. It's called "How Long Do You Need to Fast for Autophagy?" And really it's just going through and answering some questions like, what is autophagy? What is the process? How does it work in fasting? How long do you need to fast? I don't think I need to go through the article on this because this is your area of expertise, but I will post it on the website for people to look at for reference. But why don't you just walk our listeners through the benefits of fasting in terms of autophagy and what that does for the body?
Yeah, people overcomplicate this, and they also make it too rigid. Autophagy, it's a big fancy word we like to throw around. It just means recycling. That's it. Your body's recycling system is your autophagy system. And it's going on all the time, whether you're fasting or not. Okay. Your body will recycle and reuse 1.3% of your weight every day, right? No matter what's going on. So what we want to do is we want to make that process more efficient. That's all we're doing. And the signs they're talking about, there's 3 types of autophagy. The main one that everyone talks about is called macro autophagy, and that's when the cells start to recycle their old parts and start to behave differently that way. They get upgraded, so to speak. Okay, and part of that is when a cell's not working right, it becomes inefficient. Think of someone who's on a labor force and they're working, they're overworked, and they're just not as efficient. And then on top of that, they don't stop at their retirement date. They're supposed to retire and go to the Bahamas, wherever cells go, and hang out, but they don't because they're overworked and they're behind, and they just keep going. That happens in our body too. And these cells just are not very efficient. And so when the process of autophagy, it goes in and basically resets their clock, and they go, hey, what am I doing here? I'm supposed to be retired. And they take off. Well, they die, but they take off. And then new cells come, new workers, brand new, right out of college, they're all excited, and they work from stem cells, and they kick butt, and they take over, and that's the anti-aging element of it. And that's how that's how it's called healing, actually. That's how it happens. And so that goes on through autophagy. Autophagy, or the recycling system, is turned on and up and efficient in the repair phase, in the repair state of the body. There's growth and there's repair. They're not the same. It's an or. It's like a teeter-totter. When the growth is up, repair is down. And growth is what we go through when we're feeding. It's also called the fed state, right? So that's where those hormones, insulin, mTOR, all these things that stop autophagy, because that's repair, and they work on growth. We want to be in repair a lot and we want to be in repair a lot and growth a little, sporadically. They are both 100% important, but they are not 50-50 partners. If you're stuck in growth, like eating 15 hours a day in the fed state, you won't go through that deep level of autophagy. You won't have the recycling. And so you're working on a whole bunch of old, outdated software and machinery going on in your body. And that's what causes the breakdown. So autophagy can be seen, macro autophagy, what they're talking about, can be seen within 3 hours in someone who is metabolically fit and flexible. You can have it shift that fast. But what they're testing, most of this data that they're talking about comes from petri dishes, right? Like yeast, worms, things like that. There's some animal data, and there's even less human data, but we know there's a process. And where it peaks is about between 24 and 36 hours, and it can stay there, and it is up about 300%, and that's when things are really humming. And it'll keep doing that until we stop it by putting it in the fed state, basically by eating, by eating anything that turns on insulin or mTOR. mTOR is to protein what insulin is to carbs. Very similar, right? So that's the regulator. And when those come on, it tells the body, okay, we're eating fed state, turn off the repair. And so if you're eating 15 hours a day, 12 hours a day, even 10 hours a day, you're not in the repair. You're not getting that benefit.
You shared a really interesting chart with me. It's the 48-hour fast play-by-play, and it's what happens in your body when you're doing the fast. So I know most of our listeners are listeners, but not a lot of people watch our videos yet. So I will definitely share this in the show notes because I think it is a really helpful visual for people. So you're saying, according to this chart, like 48 hours is kind of where the magic happens.
Well, what I did is there's a lot of big names in fasting and health out there putting out these charts. And they put them out like this is going to happen here, there, and like that. And it makes me tense because that's not the way it works. It's like saying this exercise will have this result for you versus someone who's an Olympic athlete versus someone who's right off the couch, right? It doesn't. Are you going to benefit? Yes. But is your process and reaction going to be the same? Absolutely not. Those things can happen. And that's what we've seen happen based on the data we talked about, worms, petri dishes, yeast, and the studies. So it's an estimate. And if you want to get all of that out of it, you have to set it up. You can't just stop eating for 48 hours and think all that's going to happen, at least not the first time. There's four phases of the complete fasting cycle. And you have to go through all of them to get the most out. And that's why we put it in a rotation over a long period of time, in and out, because each time you get better at it. Each time you get more efficient. Think of exercise. If you say, hey, Don, go do one exercise session, I could do that. And would I be better for it? I would say yes. Is that the same as exercising regularly over 6 months? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And my workout in month 1 will feel and look and do something different for me than my workout in month 6, right? It compounds, and the same thing can happen in your body if you know how to set it up right. And that's when we see amazing things happen. Like we said, that liver goes back to normal. With skin, eye, hairs, everything starts to change. You look younger. You start to glow again. People lose weight. People can lose a lot of weight if they have it to lose, if they do it right. We're talking big numbers here. I think our biggest loser, I don't want to say it that way, our person who lost the most weight in our 16-week program, I think they lost 65 pounds, and most of that came off in the first 14 weeks, right? And that's verified by what is it called, a smart scale that's connected to the system, and they also go to the doctor for the blood tests and stuff like that. So that was real, and that happens fast. It's almost like the body isn't burning it, it's releasing it. It's releasing something. There's other mechanisms that we don't know about that are going on, because the calorie model, it doesn't add up. It never. I mean, I don't even know. I don't use it in my system. I don't use calories in my system at all because it's very misleading and so on. But the body will respond, and we've seen Hashimoto's thyroiditis clear up completely. I mean, they test everything. Not me. They go back to their doctor, the endocrinologist. They test everything, and it's no longer detectable. That type 2 diabetes, every single day it happens. So there's all different things. We have people have changes in their vision. because the body is just works in a hyper healthy mode and repair, and it starts fixing everything. Right? It's like going to your parents' house and grabbing the screwdriver and the hammer and fixing all the things that they've been complaining about forever. It's a completely different feel and look. So there's a lot that's possible, but the more you do it and the way you set it up, the better you get at it and the more you get out of it.
That makes so much sense. And yeah, the body does not want to be sick or diseased. The body wants to thrive. And so all we need to do is give it the materials in the environment to do that. So that makes sense. You mentioned type 2 diabetes, and just because I want to get onto this next article here, and they kind of go together. So this next article is called "These Three Siblings All Have Type 2 Diabetes. Here's How They Manage the Condition." And basically it's about a family where the mom has type 2 diabetes, and then all three of the adult children, siblings, also have type 2 diabetes. And I hear this a lot in my practice. I'm sure you hear it a lot, where people come in saying, oh, well, that just runs in my family. That runs in my family. And so people have accepted disease, illness, sickness as just part of their genetic makeup. But something you said recently, or just when this last conversation was, no, like you can, if you give the body what it needs, it can start healing. So can you talk to us a little bit about how genetics do play a role, or how, if we feel like we've been dealt a bad, like a bum deal, like how can we support our bodies?
Yeah, this topic gets me kicked out of groups all the time. We really want to say it's our genes. It runs in my family. I'm overweight because it runs in my family. I'm diabetic because it runs in my family. No, you have those issues because nobody runs in your family. That's the old joke, right? So it's a learned behavior. 95% of chronic illness is 100% lifestyle based. That's significant. Do we have genetic influences? Yeah, just like how tall you are and your body structure. It'll influence mechanics and how you move and energy production, all sorts of stuff. So there are influences, but what the metabolic, the core fundamental metabolic problems that we suffer from are lived into us. They're not bred into us. And that happens in our surroundings. Nobody likes this topic, but these problems, I call them insulin resistance and everything that comes from it. Metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, weight gain, weight loss resistance, heart disease, Alzheimer's, cancer, all stems from this. Starts when we're very small children. Okay, we basically break the system and the body adapts. I call it an injury. I think it's a metabolic injury on the cellular level. And that injury, the mechanisms to be healthy and thrive are hardwired. Okay, disease are secondary, and you have to work real hard to make the body get a disease, but it will. And even that disease is a smart response, considering it's like a bend versus break concept. The body will bend into disease rather than break and die. Okay, and so that's what we see. And so these pathways have been changed. So the hardwiring is not, we're not using it, and the body creates these workarounds because, like you said, it's going to live. It's going to do what it needs to do. It's smarter than us. And now we're running on these workarounds. Think of like at work on the computer or something, a detour when they're working on the road. It'll get you there, but it's not the way you want it. It's not the best way to go, right? Same thing. So when we want to fix these problems, we got to reinforce the hardwiring, get back to how the body wants to function, and at the same time, break down the workarounds. Otherwise, you can't have both going efficiently at the same time. That's why if you have type 2 diabetes, high blood sugar, right, and you lower it naturally with an herb or a shake or a powder or a medication, it doesn't change your outcomes. It doesn't change your future. You can be type 2 diabetic with normal blood sugar if you control it tightly. We've got decades of research on this, because diabetes is not a blood sugar problem. It's an insulin problem. It's a hormone problem. It's a core metabolic problem. So if you're just looking at the effect, you'll never address the cause, and that you'll still go down the road for the amputations, the blindness, the neuropathy that happens in type 2 diabetes, and the heart attacks. Unfortunately, just you'll have normal blood sugar. That's what I was talking about earlier. The narrative, the definition, what the story that we're running on is incorrect. We knew about it decades ago, but the system is so structured in that they're not agile. They can't change it. So we have to change it, which means we have to learn it. But if you fix that mechanism, strengthen the hardwiring, break down the workarounds, your body will respond better. It will respond in a healthy way. It can. but it's not easy. And that starts to happen as a kid. We feed our kids too much junk, period. The body is not designed to run on sugar, on processed foods, anything that's made from a powder. So anything flour based, and I don't care if it's coconut flour or GMO wheat flour, it's still powder. It still has a hyper insulin response in your body. Or if it's protein powder, the beautiful whey protein everyone at the gym loves to slam, hugely insulinogenic. Problem, we're not meant to. So the body figures out how to get by. And now we're running as adults on this get by system, and we can't keep up. We can't do it. Too many plates spinning in the air. And so we start to see problems. So once we're there, we lose some weight, we drop our blood sugar, we have this false sense of security that everything's okay, and it's not. You're still sick. You still have metabolic syndrome. You're still there. And until you do what we know can change that, you're on that path. And that's hard for people to hear. It's hard for me to hear. I've had metabolic syndrome twice, right? Different times in my life, we've moved and changed and done things, whatever. And next thing you know, I'm testing myself. I'm writing these programs. I'm going, oh my gosh, look at me. I'm borderline metabolic syndrome. So I had to get on my game and do the same thing. You got to do it. We all come from different stock. I'm 40 pounds lighter than when I graduated high school. So I came from some big stock. I was a big boy. And so there's those things we have to live with. But the good news is it can change. You can change your entire health future and that of your generations and kids to come if you take it seriously.
I love that. And I think that you said it so beautifully. And there is hope for people. You don't have to be doomed. Your destiny does not have to be the fate of your parents, your grandparents, or anyone else in your family. We can change. And I think Dr. Hyman says something about how as our DNA is the trigger or something, but oh gosh, I'm totally butchering this, but it's our lifestyle that pulls it or something. Yes, something like that. Whatever. Someone else said it way better than I just did. But that kind of just sums up exactly what you said. And I'm so glad that you're out there offering these solutions for people, offering hope for people, and letting them know that there is a better way. Where can our listeners find you, learn more about you? I know you have a Facebook group.
Yeah. The best way to find me is on Facebook. For whatever reason, that's where I ended up creating most of my stuff. I have a personal page, Don Clum. You can go, it's public and open. You can go check that out. But I have a group that's called Insulin Friendly Fasting Secrets. And that is where I've been building my archives, all my posts, all my articles, my videos from interviews like this, from my lecture series when I go to do medical continuing education seminars. I put my teaching slides up there, some of the assets from my program. My program is separate, but all the concepts are in there. And I do lives, I do videos, I post there every day. And so that's a great place if you want to go. There's hundreds of articles, dozens of videos and slides and recordings, a lot of stuff for free. You go check it out and start your base of knowledge. But you're right, you can change this. You can have, I don't care how bad off you are. I got people who are going through who are on multiple medications, very much overweight, wheelchairs sometimes, that there's a lot of limitations, but you can always improve. Will everything go away 100%? I don't know, but you can improve your quality of life, your duration, your satisfaction, your mood, depression, whatever it is, it can improve. One of the big concepts that we push is the start, stop, start mechanisms in the body. Remember, the body does not like to be in a constant environment. Think of heart rate variability. If you know what that is, it's a timing. Yeah, great. It's a timing between the beats, right? And we want a lot of variable. If it's the same, that's a problem. And the ultimate constant for a heartbeat is a flat line. Nobody wants that because you're dead, right? So we want that. We want to always be changing. And so we do that with our exercise. We do that with our physical activity. We do that with our eating times, like I said, sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the evening, with our fasting and a rotation. And the more you activate that, it tells the body to respond right now. And that's what the body's used to doing, because it was right now or you die. And so it's used to that. And that's when we see amazing things happen in relatively a short period of time. And so don't give up hope. I don't care what your story is. If you're listening and watching and you can do anything, you can change this. You're not set. There is no destiny in your genes for what you got, for the most part. There are some things that are truly genetic, but that's not what we're talking about.
Beautiful close out there. on hope. So I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. This has been like a fascinating conversation. I know our audience is going to love this talk. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, that is the end of today's episode. Our theme music is created by Andrew Bowden, and production services are by Kevin Kennedy, Spain of Disc of Light Media. Have a great week, everyone.